The moment Philip Vance stepped into the luxury car services break room, dressed as a new driver, he overheard a conversation that made his stomach turn. "I swear, the office staff are useless," a driver muttered as he leaned against the counter, stirring his coffee. "They sit in their cushy chairs all day, screwing up schedules, and we're the ones who have to fix their mistakes. Bunch of idiots." Philip, hidden behind his well-crafted disguise, dyed brown hair, fake glasses, and a slightly slouched posture, froze in place. He had inherited the company from his late father 2 years ago, but with 15 locations and over 200 employees, he rarely met the ground-level workers personally. He had come undercover to see why customer complaints were rising and why some of his best employees had been resigning. This was not the welcome he had expected. Another driver, a stocky man with graying hair, chuckled, "Don't even get me started on the managers. They only show up when they want to yell at someone. Useless." Philip clenched his jaw. He had always believed in treating his employees well, but hearing his staff openly badmouth their coworkers like this, something was seriously wrong. He took a slow breath and walked toward the group. "Hey, I'm Paul, new driver." The graying man gave him a once-over. "First day, good luck." "This place is a mess," he smirked. "You'll see soon enough." Philip forced a chuckle. "Yeah, what's so bad about it?" The first driver scoffed. "Dispatch screws up the routes, customers treat us like personal chauffeurs, and the pay's not worth the hassle." "Honestly, man, if you have other options, take 'em." Philip frowned. He knew the company paid well above the industry standard, so why did they feel this way? Before he could ask more, a woman entered the break room, her uniform neat and her expression tired but focused. "Hey guys, we got a last-minute client, high profile, needs a pickup in 20 minutes. Who's available?" The talkative driver groaned. "Of course they dropped stuff on us last second." He looked at Philip. "New guy, you want to impress the bosses, take it." Philip nodded. "Sure." "Where's the car?" The woman, her name tag read Natalie Fenton, handed him a key fob. "Black sedan, spot 4. GPS is set, just be professional, okay? This client's important." Philip caught the stress in her voice. She cared. Unlike the others, she wasn't complaining, she was making sure things ran smoothly. As he left the break room, he made a mental note. Natalie Fenton, someone worth watching. Philip found the sedan, slid behind the wheel, and adjusted his disguise in the mirror. He had spent years running this company from a distance, trusting reports from managers and district leads. But now, as he pulled out of the lot and joined the streets, he wondered how much of the reality had been hidden from him. One thing was clear, this was just the beginning. Philip kept his hands steady on the wheel as he maneuvered through city traffic. The black sedan was smooth, responsive, top of the line, just as he expected from his fleet. But his focus wasn't on the car's performance. His mind replayed the conversation in the break room. Dissatisfaction ran deep. That much was obvious. But was it just a few disgruntled employees, or was there something fundamentally broken in his company's operations? He arrived at the pickup location, a sleek glass office tower in the financial district. A sharply dressed man in his late 50s stood waiting at the curb, glancing at his watch. Philip pulled up, got out, and opened the door with a nod. The client stepped in without acknowledging him, too busy on his phone. Philip returned to the driver's seat and checked the navigation. The destination was a private club across town. As he drove, the man sighed in frustration. "Tell dispatch to stop sending different drivers every time. I don't have time to break in new people." Philip kept his voice neutral. "I'll pass that along, sir." The man barely reacted, still focused on his phone. Philip knew the service prided itself on consistency for high-profile clients. If this one was complaining, it meant something wasn't working as intended. Another problem to add to his growing list. When they arrived, the man stepped out without a word. No tip, no acknowledgement. Philip wasn't offended. He had dealt with high-level executives long enough to know some barely noticed the people around them, but something about the interaction unsettled him. He wasn't sure what yet. He pulled away from the curb and checked his schedule. Another pickup, this time at a hotel near the airport. As he drove, he kept an eye on the dispatch system. The interface was cluttered with multiple last-minute changes. Drivers were being rerouted constantly, sometimes doubling back across the city. Inefficient, wasteful. No wonder the drivers were frustrated. He had always assumed the system ran smoothly, but seeing it firsthand, he realized how chaotic it was. At the hotel, a woman in her 40s with a designer handbag and sharp eyes got in. She studied him briefly before speaking. "You're new," she said. Philip met her gaze in the mirror. "First day," she nodded. "You'll learn quickly. This company used to be the best these days." "Not so much." Philip kept his tone light. "What's changed?" she sighed. "Drivers don't know the clients. Used to be I'd get the same few and they knew my preferences. Now it's different people every time. Feels impersonal, and the cars." She ran a manicured hand along the seat. "Not as well maintained as before." Philip's stomach tightened. His company prided itself on excellence. If clients were noticing a decline in quality, it meant standards were slipping. As he dropped her off, she hesitated before getting out. "If you want a tip," Philip shook his head. "Not necessary, ma'am." She gave him a curious look but didn't press. Once she was gone, he pulled into a nearby lot and took a deep breath. The complaints weren't just from employees. Customers were feeling it too. He checked his messages. Another job had been added to his queue, this time a long-distance drive to an estate outside the city. Before heading out, he decided to stop by the main office. If there was a disconnect between management and staff, he needed to see it for himself. The office was smaller than he remembered. Tucked away on the second floor of a commercial building, it was clean but lacked energy. Inside, a few employees sat at desks, juggling calls and schedules. A woman with short brown hair and sharp eyes looked up as he entered. Her name tag read Natalie Fenton. "You're the new driver, right?" "Paul," Philip nodded. She gestured to a chair. "Give me a second." He sat, observing. Natalie handled a tense phone call with calm efficiency, smoothing over a scheduling mix-up. When she hung up, she sighed and turned to him. "I don't usually meet drivers in person, but since you're new, how's your first day?" Philip chose his words carefully. "Busy. Seems like things move fast around here." She gave a dry laugh. "That's one way to put it. Seems like dispatch has a lot on their plate," she exhaled, rubbing her temples. "More than we should. The system's outdated. We put in requests for an upgrade months ago. Never happened." Philip's pulse quickened. He was the one who had delayed that upgrade, thinking the current system was sufficient. "Must be frustrating," he said. She nodded. "Drivers blame us when things go wrong. Managers blame us too, but we're just working with what we've got." Philip leaned forward. "And the managers? How involved are they?" She hesitated, measuring her words. "Depends on the location. Some are hands-on, others not so much." Philip caught the unspoken meaning. Some managers weren't doing their jobs. Before he could ask more, a man in a suit stepped into the office. He moved with the confidence of someone in charge. "Natalie, where's the report on last month's expenses?" Natalie straightened. "I sent it this morning, Greg." Greg frowned. "I didn't see it. Send it again." She nodded, but Philip caught the tension in her posture. Greg turned his gaze on Philip. "Who's this?" "New driver," Natalie said. Greg barely acknowledged him before walking off. Philip watched him go, unease growing in his gut. Something was off, and he was going to get to the bottom of it. Philip left the office with his mind racing. Every piece of the puzzle was coming together, and the picture it painted wasn't pretty. The drivers felt overworked and unappreciated. Dispatch was struggling with an outdated system that he had failed to upgrade. And now, after meeting Greg, the regional manager, it was clear that leadership might be part of the problem too. As he walked back to his car, he glanced at the dispatch app again. His next assignment was a long-distance ride to an estate outside the city. He had expected to spend a full day driving, but now this ride felt like an opportunity. Long drives meant conversation, and conversation meant information. The pickup location was an upscale brownstone in one of the quieter parts of the city. When he pulled up, a man in his 60s stepped out, dressed in an impeccable navy suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He moved with the ease of someone used to being driven around. Philip got out, opened the door for him, and waited as the man settled into the back seat. Once he was back behind the wheel, the man spoke, his voice calm but authoritative. "How long have you been with the company?" Philip kept his tone neutral. "Just started." The man nodded slightly. "I've been using this service for over a decade. Things have changed." Philip glanced at him in the mirror. "Good changes or bad?" The man exhaled slowly. Let's just say it used to be seamless, I never had to think about it. Now, last-minute driver swaps, inconsistent vehicle conditions, even the professionalism of the drivers has declined. Philip gripped the wheel a little tighter. Every client he had driven today had echoed the same concerns. "Do you still trust the service?" he asked carefully. The man gave a small shrug. "For now, but I've started looking at alternatives." Philip felt that statement like a punch to the gut. Long-term, high-value clients were the backbone of the business. If they were considering leaving, the company wasn't just dealing with internal dissatisfaction, it was losing its reputation. The rest of the ride was quiet, but Philip's mind wasn't. By the time they reached the estate, the man gave a polite nod before stepping out. Philip watched as he disappeared through the grand entryway, then pulled the car around to a small rest area nearby. He needed to process everything. Leaning back against the headrest, he began piecing it all together. The drivers were frustrated because they were dealing with inefficient dispatching, last-minute changes, and poor communication. Dispatch was struggling because they didn't have the tools they needed to do their jobs well. And upper management, the people who were supposed to be overseeing everything, seemed disengaged, unresponsive, or in Greg's case, outright dismissive. Worst of all, the clients noticed, and they were losing faith. Philip closed his eyes for a moment. This wasn't just a minor operational issue. This was a systemic failure, and if he didn't act fast, the company his father had built with such care would collapse from the inside out. Just as he was about to drive back toward the city, his phone buzzed with a new assignment. A driver had called out, and they needed a replacement for a late-night pickup at one of the company's private airport lounges. Philip accepted it without hesitation. If there was anywhere he needed to be tonight, it was there. The lounge had an air of exclusivity. It was designed for high-profile clients, celebrities, executives, and public figures who valued discretion with their travel. Philip parked near the entrance and stepped inside under the pretense of waiting for his client. The atmosphere was sleek but subdued, with soft lighting and quiet conversations. A few attendants moved between guests, offering refreshments and handling reservations. Philip's eyes scanned the room until they landed on a man standing near the reception desk. He recognized him immediately: Greg, the regional manager. Greg was chatting with another man, a well-dressed gentleman with an expensive watch and an air of confidence. The way they spoke suggested familiarity. Philip moved closer, keeping his steps casual. "I've been telling you," Greg was saying, his voice low but firm. "If you want priority bookings, you need to go through me directly. The standard system is a mess, but I can make sure your requests don't get lost." The man nodded, slipping something into Greg's hand. "That's why I prefer dealing with you. The last thing I need is delays." Philip felt his pulse quicken. Greg wasn't just neglecting his job, he was running his own side operation, bypassing the company's official booking system to give special treatment to certain clients for a price. Philip took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay composed. This explained so much. Greg wasn't interested in fixing dispatch or helping employees because he was benefiting from the chaos. The worse the system functioned, the more valuable his special access became. Philip clenched his jaw. This was more than incompetence. This was corruption. A movement near the entrance caught his attention. His client had arrived, an older woman with a designer coat and a no-nonsense expression. Philip returned to the car, opening the door for her as she got in. As he pulled away from the lounge, his mind was already made up. Greg had to go. And tomorrow, everything was going to change. Philip barely slept that night. Too much was at stake. Every hour he had spent undercover had exposed deeper fractures within his company, and now that he knew the truth, there was no turning back. By morning, he had a plan. The first stop was the corporate office. He arrived earlier than usual, before most employees filtered in, and waited near the conference room. When Greg walked in, looking confident as ever, Philip followed him inside and shut the door behind them. Greg barely glanced up from his phone. Philip didn't waste time. He pulled off his glasses, straightened his posture, and met Greg's gaze with the full weight of his authority. The shift in Greg's expression was immediate. His eyes widened and his phone slipped slightly in his grip before he caught himself. Philip didn't let him recover. There was no raised voice, no dramatic outburst, just cold, precise words. He laid everything out. The neglect, the inefficiencies, the manipulation of the booking system for personal gain. Greg tried to interject, but Philip shut him down with a simple fact. He had seen it firsthand. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Greg's usual arrogance cracked under the weight of reality. He scrambled for justifications, claiming it was just a way to keep things running smoothly, that everyone benefited, but Philip didn't entertain the excuses. The decision was already made. Security arrived moments later. Greg didn't argue as he was escorted out. By the time the rest of the staff arrived, his office was already being cleared. Philip wasted no time moving to the next phase. A company-wide meeting was scheduled within the hour. Employees gathered in the main conference room, while others joined remotely from different locations. He stood at the front, scanning the faces of the people who had kept his company running, some weary, some frustrated, some simply resigned to the way things had been. That was about to change. He started with the truth. He told them why he had gone undercover, what he had seen, and what needed to be fixed. He acknowledged the driver's frustrations, the dispatch team's struggles, and the client's declining trust. He didn't sugarcoat it. Then he laid out the plan. The outdated dispatch system, being replaced immediately. The request had already been approved and implementation would begin that week. Management oversight, a full audit of leadership was underway. No more unchecked authority, driver concerns. A direct communication channel was being established between them and upper management, no more layers of bureaucracy blocking their voices. As he spoke, the energy in the room shifted. Doubt turned into cautious optimism. Some employees exchanged glances, others nodded. Then he turned to Natalie Fenton. He publicly acknowledged her dedication and professionalism, making it clear that people like her were the backbone of the company. Then he announced her promotion effective immediately. She would oversee operations directly, ensuring that the changes weren't just words but actions. For the first time since he had entered this undercover journey, he saw something new in the employees' faces: belief. When the meeting ended, people lingered, discussing, questioning, but most importantly engaging. Philip stayed until the last person left. This wasn't just about fixing problems, it was about rebuilding trust. As he finally stepped outside, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. The company wasn't perfect, and there was still a long road ahead. But for the first time in a long time, he knew they were headed in the right direction. Philip spent the next few days overseeing the implementation of the changes he had promised. He didn't just delegate, he was present in every meeting, ensuring that every adjustment was executed with precision. The new dispatch system was rolled out in phases, with training sessions scheduled to prevent disruptions. He personally sat in on several of them, watching as dispatchers tested the new interface. Drivers were given direct access to report scheduling issues, and almost immediately, efficiency improved. The constant rerouting and last-minute changes that had frustrated them were drastically reduced. It wasn't perfect yet, but the impact was undeniable. Despite the momentum, Philip knew that fixing the technical issues was only part of the solution. The deeper problem, the company's culture, would take longer to repair. Employees had spent too much time feeling unheard. One leadership change and a software upgrade wouldn't erase years of neglect overnight. To address this, he made a point to visit different locations unannounced. He spoke to drivers during their breaks, checked in with dispatchers in real time, and even rode along with a few employees to see how things were operating firsthand. One evening, he found himself in a quiet corner of the main office, reviewing reports when Natalie approached. She had stepped into her new role with a level of focus that impressed him, but tonight she looked more thoughtful than usual. She placed a folder on the table in front of him. "You should see this." Philip opened it, scanning the pages. It contained feedback that employees had submitted over the last few days, both good and bad. Some praised the changes, saying they finally felt like someone was listening. Others were still skeptical, unsure if this was just another temporary fix before things returned to the way they had been. He closed the folder, considering, "They don't fully trust it yet," Natalie nodded. "And I don't blame them. A lot of people have seen promises before without real follow-through. Philip leaned back slightly, tapping his fingers against the table. What do you think would convince them? She hesitated for a moment before answering. Consistency. If they see these changes lasting beyond the first wave of excitement, they'll believe it. But that means we need to keep showing up not just now, but in the months ahead. She was right. One of the biggest mistakes he had made before going undercover was assuming that reports and second-hand updates were enough to understand what was happening on the ground. That approach had failed. Philip set the folder aside. Then that's exactly what we'll do. Over the next few weeks, he kept his presence consistent. He didn't just check in, he actively participated. He made sure that every location, from the busiest hubs to the smaller branches, received the same level of attention. One afternoon, he dropped by a location that had been flagged for having higher than usual driver turnover. He arrived unannounced and watched the interactions between employees. The tension was subtle, but it was their hesitation in the way drivers approached the dispatch desk, clipped responses from the office staff. He asked a few quiet questions, listening carefully to how employees described their frustrations. It didn't take long to discover the root of the problem. The local manager had developed a reputation for being difficult, not outright hostile, but dismissive and unwilling to listen. Rather than confronting the manager immediately, Philip chose to observe a little longer. He watched how the office handled last-minute changes, how drivers reacted to their schedules, and how complaints were addressed. The pattern was clear. Issues weren't being escalated. Instead, they were being brushed aside. That night, he scheduled a meeting with the manager. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation like it had been with Greg, but it was direct. Philip laid out the concerns and gave the manager a choice: either commit to changing the way they handled employees or step aside for someone who would. The response was defensive at first, but after a long discussion, the manager conceded. They agreed to adjust their approach, and Philip made sure they followed through by checking in regularly. As the weeks passed, he saw real improvement. Morale was lifting. Employees who had been on the verge of quitting were reconsidering. Even customers began to notice a difference. Rides were smoother, drivers more engaged. One evening, Philip found himself in the same break room where he had first overheard the complaints that had set this entire journey in motion. The atmosphere felt different now. Drivers were still talking, but the tone had shifted. Frustration had given way to cautious optimism. He listened as one driver mentioned how dispatch had finally started running smoothly. Another commented on how he had actually been asked for his feedback, something that had never happened before. Philip didn't interrupt. He simply sat back, taking in the moment. It wasn't perfect yet. There was still work to be done. But for the first time in a long time, his company felt like it was heading in the right direction. And this time, he wouldn't let it slip away.